Welcome to Mental Health Matters and Friday Focus. I am Danielle.
And I'm Jane.
And today we are going to be going over some stats and facts in our continued conversation about things that matter around mental health. Jane and I were interested in looking at some numbers and to look at some facts and see what we could come up with. So we both ended up down a deep rabbit hole in the internet. We encourage you all to do the same. We have 20 minutes today and realize that this is a lot of information to cover in even, a month. We could go on and on each category. So what we've done is we've categorized these today. We're going to look at global stats and facts, a little bit about the economy, of course, children and mental health, depression, suicide, and medication. So both of us have gone down our own rabbit holes. We don't know what each other has come up with. And we are excited to just sit together and have this conversation and see what we come up with.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I have to say, I think it's interesting because Danielle was very passionate about the subject, stats and facts, and it's really, truly is not my personality at all. I was like, stats and facts? I am not. My husband laughed because I'm not a stats and facts person. I'm more emotional stories, all that. And I have to say, Danielle, thank you for getting me to research it, because I realized that I had no idea, and it literally, my heart was broken researching it. It's almost got me teared up because I don't think I had any idea, truly, the crisis of mental health. I'm shocked, still shocked.
It's shocking.
And so it's important for people to really understand. So we'll start with the global, what we each found out globally.
We are in a crisis when we look at the global situation, right, Jane? So one of the numbers that came up for me was, I was looking at the in the global was 792 million people. That's more than 10% of the global population has suffered from a mental illness globally. That took me back. I was like, okay, so 10%.
I know. And so then you look at, they break it down, depression, 264 million people globally struggle with depression. It's like heartbreaking. I was literally shocked.
One of the facts that came up for me in just working with Peace 360 Initiative early on, when Chris Raja and I first started talking, I had the pleasure of meeting and talking with people from all over the world about mental health. And I had these meetings in the middle of the night. And one of the words that kept coming up that I was so surprised about, that I was like, what does this mean? Was tribalism. And so I'd ask people, like, what causes mental health in your region? What are some of the causes? What do you see as happening? And so often in these different areas, it was tribalism, this word. So I really had to dig deeper and look at what it is. And I started finding really cool articles. Those in the know, and I didn't know. But tribalism is
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, right. And so this is causing mental health. Well, what is this thing? And so globally, it's actually divisiveness. That's what we talk about here. So it's a real fact that we look at tribalism, and we need to look at how separate us versus them mentality creates discomfort and illness in our thinking. So pulling to one side with ethnicity, race, religion, territory, political viewpoints. It could be you need a tribe for, something you suffered from. So it's really recognizing that when we group ourselves together, if that togetherness is creating an us versus them mentality, a divisiveness, that can really increase your risk for mental illness. So that was a fascinating fact that I learned with Peace 360. So I think for global, I think divisiveness and tribalism is something definitely that I think we need to talk more about.
Wow. It's something that I think it's such a big topic. That's the crazy part. The other thing, when I was looking at globally, when you break it down, some of these disorders is like anxieties. 284 million people suffer with anxiety globally. 46 million bipolar disorder. Eating disorders, 60 million people struggle with eating disorders. And I'm in that category. When I was a young woman, I suffered with an eating disorder, and no one knew my own struggles. So many things. I am shocked. Alcohol use disorder, 107 million people worldwide. the stats are crazy.
It
Crazy.
is crazy. And if we look at the cost, I only have a number that I just pulled from the United States, and it was saying that $350 billion a year are what it takes to, that what it costs the US economy. So 350 billion in just the US alone, and 71 billion of that is just in depression. That's how much depression
Wow.
is costing the economy. $71 billion. So
That's
this,
crazy.
for those that, really focus on the money side of things, this is definitely, an opportunity to look at.
Yeah, and that's one of the topics we're doing is the economic cost. So I didn't find a ton on it, like the cost, but it was, I being from Canada myself, it said the economic burden of mental health in Canada is estimated at 51 billion per year. It's like, anyway, it's crazy.
It is crazy to think of the money, and we think of all that money, and if we translate money into time and we translate money into human hearts, it is devastating.
Yeah, and the other one thing I read was the mental health industry is a multi-billion-dollar undertaking in the U.S. Out of the overall healthcare budget for the United States, roughly 5.6% is spent solely on mental health-related endeavors. So approximately 113 billion
And I
of
guess we
their.
could flip that, because there's people profiting off this industry, right? So it's costing the industry money, but where is that money actually going? It's going into the pockets of people that are profiting in some way, and hopefully they're using it by ethical means, and hopefully they're not sitting on boards that are a little bit, crisscrossy. I really hope that, that money is being tracked in a way that's actually helping people, and
Yeah.
also not wasted. There's a lot of silos. So I'm imagining just the whole money thing, and I'm just thinking, wow, is this money being used well? Or where's this money going? Is it have good intentions? Whose pockets does this
Hopefully,
money rest in?
because
Right?
it's crazy the numbers. Honestly, the research, me looking into this, is
Yeah,
shocked me. So,
sure.
um, children, want to get into the subject of children, it just breaks my heart when we started researching the statistics on children. I can't even. It said like I got approximately 1 in 5 of the world's children and adolescents have a mental disorder. 1 in 5. And approximately half of the mental disorders begin before the age of 14.
That's a big thing. So what's happening before the age of 14? So if 1 in 5 children are suffering from mental illness, I mean, we could really go back to the economic money and how much money is spent on just even ADHD medication alone. And who's getting all that money, and where's that going? How is that really helping these kids? So half of all mental illnesses start before the age of 14. I got that one too. And one of the things I thought was really interesting to look at. So I was looking at like, what can we do to prevent mental illness, or what can we do to encourage mental wellness in childhood? So I have a
Yeah,
list here. So healthy sleep patterns was a big one. So we see that a lot. And I see a lot of too parents talking about melatonin. They're talking about like they know that sleep patterns are important.
yeah,
But how do we encourage that in like a holistic approach? I'd be interested in a conversation there. Regular exercise. I know with the pandemic, there's definitely more screen time. So there's another, risk factor right now. Developing coping skills. So learning coping skills and resiliency habits, problem solving skills, learning to regulate behavior. So parents and teachers teaching actual behavioral skill is
yeah.
important. So not just getting kids in trouble because they have bad behavior, learning good behavior and
But it's so
teaching.
hard. It's so hard because in a perfect world, we'd all be like, "Oh, this is what we do as parents," but we come from broken backgrounds. We become parents. We haven't healed ourselves, and then we raise children, and we don't know. We love our children, but we don't have the skills. So it's hard. Like I was 22 when I had a baby, and I think I was a pretty good mom, but I had a lot of stuff that I hadn't healed in my own brain. And so there was one stat I had here, which I thought was interesting, is approximately 1 in 9 people in settings affected by conflict have a moderate or severe mental disorder. So 1 in 9 that are in a setting of conflict. So if kids are being raised in homes that are the parents are fighting and you remember my parents were great, but they had issues too, and I remember the fights clearly because you're emotional and you're little and it's that's the hard part is how do we heal the parents, heal ourselves so that we can raise healthy children.
Well, you just talked about my mission, Jane. So my mission in my career is definitely to reduce conflict in the lives of children, and I see this as a huge opportunity. I do, and I would even break it down into looking at the everyday disputes that parents are having at home. You know, those little disputes that nag and nag on and on and on over time become entrenched conflict. And those are what causes families to break down over time, right? If we're not handling all those everyday things, like who's doing the dishes and who's picking up the kids and whose turn is it to, wash the carpet, or, parenting styles, money, these are everyday conflicts. And
Yeah.
that, can be just a small dispute, but over time they become entrenched. And kids live in those environments. And when they live in those environments, they learn the narrative from a child's context. That battle isn't a mature back and forth banter. That's misbehavior. It looks like not listening. It looks like
Yeah.
defiance. It looks like not being able to transition. I mean, just they're fighting too. They're fighting because that's what the language is at home.
Yeah,
And
it's so
that
important
creates,
too, the early years. I think for parents aren't aware. There seriously needs to be more parenting courses for even in school or something, because so that most of us become parents, and it's that early years when your baby's born to 7, their brains are it's they're forming these subconscious pathways, and you need healthy environment, but we don't know. It's so hard. I
we
just
do what we know, right? We do what we think is best. And I know I've been really going through this journey too of parent guilt, right? And I'm a parent management training specialist, and that's what I do for a living. And, I raised my kids alone. And their dad was also a single parent on his side of things. And there was huge conflict between us. Huge.
hard.
Our kids grew up in so much trauma. And I just look back and I'm like, I'm so glad they're okay. But, we could have, it's heartbreaking to think. And um, I wonder now about what all we can do to improve folks to recognize their opportunity when they're with children, to just regulate themselves, provide strong routines,
I know.
encourage skills, like all of the things that, parent management really looks at. How is your family being managed? Because this is the root of peace. This is what we need to do, is start teaching these things at home so
And
that
I
it can be
yeah.
well.
And I think you need to reach out. And I look at my daughter. I've got 2 daughters, one in Australia, one
Yeah.
here, close to me. And the one here has 2 children, so there's 6. Marie's at 6, and Kyla's 15 months old. And they're trying to manage life. She's back to work, and her husband's working nights, and it can be stressful and that. And I think you have to reach out. Like, they ask for help from us. We help them. Like they
Yeah.
say, it takes a village to raise a child. No, you have to be able to say, I need help.
And
I need
so much, and just let that guilt kind of sit in for a minute. I hate to say that, but almost like if we're going to listen to your mom gut and her instincts and our parent instincts, that guilt is true. Like, it sucks. Nobody's perfect at this job,
no.
but listen to yourself. Like, if there's something that's not right, there's opportunities to learn, reach out and
Yeah.
get help. So kids need
This
us.
is a subject we'll have to do a live on this.
We're going to do more on parenting and kids, but I also, just can't say enough about prevention is key, and it starts in childhood. What's the next? Depression.
Depression and suicide, we're kind of doing that one combined. Hey, it's so well. We'll start with depression, I guess, but they lead into each other. Depression. I found it said depression is the most common mental disorder, followed by anxiety and bipolar disorder. So, and depression. Get this, Danielle. Depression is more common than AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. That's
Combined.
yeah.
AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. It's interesting because, and not to say that they shouldn't, but I know there's lots of like cancer agencies. There's Run for the Cure. There's all of these, but I think we could do better at getting some agencies together and really looking deeply at supporting folks with depression.
But don't you think that there's the stigma around it?
Mm.
Because if it's cancer, you've got support, you've got everything, you've got diabetes, there's so much awareness. But the minute you say you're depressed, people get like, ooh, the people don't know how to deal with mental illness and depression. It's scary for people. What do they say? Is it the right thing? What are you on meds? Like, there's such a big, like, I don't know. It's so different when you've got cancer. You've got the support comes in, or you know what I mean. Like, it's so different. But
I think what is interesting, like it's like being stuck. right? So I've been diagnosed
Yeah.
with depressive disorder, and been through a gamut of medication over my lifetime, and sat on a lot of, coaches and therapy, and really struggled with happiness. Really struggled with feeling that in my core. So a lot of really dark times, and it's like a feeling of being stuck,
Yeah.
right? Unmotivated, stuck. It just, people say, oh, think positive, and it's just that whole toxic positivity stuff. You just want to like, no, that's not actually going to help me. So I actually went into, and I thought, what, like, depression. So one of the facts that I wanted to know more about was with the DSM. So the Diagnostic Service Manual is what a psychiatrist use to look at criteria to give a diagnosis. And interestingly enough, it's only behavior that they're looking at. They don't do a brain scan. They're not doing, like, that's not really happening in my experience. It's never, ever. I've never had my brain scanned. I've only had like a conversation with
Yeah.
the psychiatrist. So the criteria. So it says in the DSM that you have to meet 5 of these. First, the depressed mood, loss of pleasure, significant weight change, change in your sleep, change in activity, fatigue, so loss of energy, diminished concentration, and feelings of guilt or worthlessness. And the last one is suicidality. So the whole idea of like suicide ideation. So you have to meet 5 of those to get the actual diagnosis. And in my experience, honestly, the diagnosis, it was just like a piece of paper on a prescription for medication. They did highlight the diagnosis there for me. But then it was just like medication. And that actually sent me down a really bad rabbit hole. I did find another fact, though, that I thought was super interesting. There's actual new evidence, Jane, that shows there's a really complex link between our gut health. So there's a relationship between our brain and our nervous system and our gut.
Yeah, having a
And
healthy
so,
gut. Yeah.
yes. So I just ended up, and I was like, wow, like the world journals are really, really publicating a lot more about our gut health and looking at mental health too. So I'm fascinated about learning more about that.
I knew about that for quite a while because I worked at the Natural
Yeah.
Health Clinic, and we
Yeah.
were really into the healthy gut, healthy mind. So
Yeah.
getting the right bacteria, people taking the probiotics, getting your healthy gut, because we would deal with people with depression and that. And we made sure that their digestive system was working and their guts healthy because of the relation. There's so much information on
Well,
that.
I was thinking about that because, like, for me, what do I do when I'm feeling depressed? Well, I want to eat donuts, and like, I'm not much, so ice cream and chocolate, I will admit. Red wine, ice cream, and chocolate are probably but those are all super full of sugar. It's like so bad for my gut,
Yeah.
and then you're not moving because you're just like feeling
It's
poopy.
a lot is the healthy bacteria, making sure. There is one other thing here that is that a fact they have. Almost 50% of those who feel they have suffered from depression or anxiety have never gone to their doctor for help. Yet, 80% who do go for help improve. It's proven. So
Treatable.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it is, and it's expected to be treatable. But so they don't go
So
for help. So why don't they go for help? What are your thoughts there?
I never went for help. I mean, I guess because I think I definitely am someone that did about 4 years ago get into really deep depression and suicide. I'm aware, I understand suicide and the thoughts, and went through a really bad time. And I never went for help because I think that people don't believe you if you ask for help. Sometimes they don't, well, you'll be okay, you'll be fine. And I don't think they really realize that we put on our happy face and everything's fine, but inside we're like breaking down. We don't want the world to know that we're not okay. So you go out and you go get your groceries and do your stuff, but inside you're you're at a breaking point and people don't believe you. You're not going to go out, crawl out of your house crying. You like put on your makeup, you get ready, you go out. And that's why I was watching, or as we're researching this, I found all these statistics and stories on suicide, and it broke my heart because they showed pictures of people the day before they committed suicide and they looked so happy with their dog and kissing and smiling with all their friends. The next day they kill themselves. What? So suicide it's so sad. I have almost 800,000 people die by suicide every year. One person dies from suicide every 40 seconds.
What?
Yeah,
Is
that's,
this is global?
yeah. Every 40 seconds in Canada, where we live, approximately 4,000 Canadians per year die by suicide, average of 11 suicides per day in Canada. It's so sad. And yet so if a person looks this happy or seems so happy, and then they kill themselves the next day, there's they're suffering inside, but they're afraid to let people know the truth and see the real you,
Yeah.
the
Well,
real person.
I think what happens over time is you end up in survival mode. So you're what you show people is your survival, right? You're good at that, like really skilled at this, right?
Yeah,
So we see people like Robin Williams, who's just
I know.
what? Like always so happy and positive, right? But underneath all of that, it's like that iceberg thing. Underneath of all of that is a story untold, is pain unraveled that's just, and it's so much and overwhelming that you just kind of be stuck. And
Honestly,
so
Danielle, I think Robin Williams, because I was thinking about him too, when he committed suicide, I think it shocked the world because we thought he had it all. He was funny, he was happy, he had money, he had a family, he had accomplished all these goals. And yet, but in his brain, in his mind, he was struggling. He wasn't able somehow to control his thoughts or what was going on in his own mind, but he could put onto the world this,
yeah,
and it's so sad.
it
And
is
the
so
numbers are
sad.
crazy to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it is sad. And I think that we need to look deeper. I really remember our last chat too. I said something like, we need to do better and we ask people how they're doing, right? Like, how are you?
I know.
Because, we say fine, but I don't know how many times I've said I'm fine. And I just am like, go into my office or go, and I'm
Yeah.
tears. I'm just like,
Yeah.
actually, I'm not okay.
Not
And
okay. No.
don't have the time to tell you right now all of
Yeah.
this stuff. And also, if I do, I'm going to burst out crying right now, or I'm going to do something irrational. So I just got to
Yeah.
brave
Actually,
face it.
I ran, like before Christmas, I ran into a lady on a walk with my dog and we just stopped talking. And I was like, oh, how are you? Typical. And she's like, I'm good. How are you? And she just looked really sad. Or there's something off. And I said, are you okay? And it didn't look at once I'd said, how are you? And she did the normal, fine, how are you? I said, are you okay? And then she said, no, and she started crying. I'm like, oh yeah, I stood and talked to her because she was going through depression and struggling and she was having a really bad time. And we had this long talk, like 20 minutes standing with her dogs, because the word, how are you? How are you is a typical, I'm good, how are you? But when you say, are you okay? Like, are you? And they're like, no. It was interesting.
That's powerful.
Anyway,
So instead of or how are you, we should ask, are you
are
okay?
you are you okay? Yeah.
Are you okay? Right now,
Yeah.
especially with the pandemic,
I
like,
know. I know.
like, is everyone okay out there? Like,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
right now, but in 2 minutes, nope.
No, I know. So did you have any suicide, any of this?
Well, I was really shocked about learning that it is the third leading cause of death between children globally between ages 15 to 19. So the third leading cause of death. So again, if we look at prevention in early childhood, then we look at like what's at risk. Our teens are at risk. Some of the risk factors were substance use. So looking at it said harmful substance use. So I know some teens do dabble. I know I sure did when I was a teenager. And so
Yeah.
looking at like harmful substance use, abuse, children that have been through abuse have a higher risk. Any bullying, oppression that's happening, in these areas where, so what I learned was globally, youth, 90% of youth live in poverty globally. Hello. So there's a risk factor. And so 90% of the youth that are actually following through with suicide were from regions of poverty. So that's the economy, all of those socioeconomic factors play a big role in mental health, especially with adolescents when the pressure and peer
Yeah.
relationships on, not being able to compete. And then of course, one of the things I thought was super interesting was that communication about suicide through social media is actually a concern. So youth
Yeah.
talking about it more, it's the whole idea of what we, I'll take from my work at CMH, what we shine a light on, right? Like, so if you think about, there's a focus on something, and there's such an increase, and I worry a little bit too about this anti-stigma stuff, right? I want it to be no stigma, but then like, is there a line? Because if we talk about something too much, right now
Yeah,
I
yeah,
also have anxiety, or I have depression, or I don't want to do suicide too. Like, so like if we focus too much on something, are we increasing the likelihood that that worries me a little bit. But I could see that, going through the rabbit hole, there's some fact to that. We
yeah.
have to watch these conversations that our kids are having, and recognize that when they're talking about something a lot, when they're focused on something a lot, there's a
And I
lot
think
there.
with kids or teenagers, when lots of times we want them to open up as parents, we want them to tell us what's going on. We're like, why are they hiding in the room? Why aren't they talking to us? And they won't. But those times when they open up, you better sit down, no matter how busy you are. Because there's times when I wanted to know why, dig deep.
Yeah.
Are my daughters okay? What are they going through? And they didn't really want to talk. But then there was times like, oh, good night. And then they start talking as you're like, they're going to bed. As you sit down at your bed and you just let them talk. You have to, as a parent, you have to be like, oh, they're willing now, because it's too hard to force it.
It's so important that
Yeah,
parents are good listeners and deep listeners, empathetic listeners, building
yeah,
empathetic connections with their kids, even in short times. I like that you mentioned bedtime. I know with a lot of my clients, they talk about bedtime and in the car. Those are
yeah,
times, and even in my experience, and when my kids were younger too, those are the times when kids want to open up, and oftentimes those are the times they're thinking about other things. So turn it off.
yeah,
Listen to your kids. I think listening is one of the most powerful prevention tools
yeah.
for parents out there, but not easy.
That's another. So we've got all these Friday focuses we can work on. So the last thing we're talking about, and you're going to talk about this. I started to research medication, and I couldn't even. It was too much for me. I didn't even understand it. And so Danielle's going to go over that quickly, and then we'll sign off. So let's hear this
Awesome.
medication.
Awesome. Jane, I just from personal lived experience, that's where I was looking at, because I have been on a lot of medications. I think, to just disclose, probably over a dozen. Right now, I'm not on medication, and I've never felt more happy. So I do
Aw.
have, a little bit of a bias around medication. I did go down to some pretty dark places, and all of those are while I was medicated. So I was worse on medication. I
Wow.
can't say that's everybody's experience. I know that, many people have found medication to be really helpful, and also that's wonderful. So
Yeah.
I think everybody's an individual, and that's a fact. This is one
Right.
of our facts. Mental health has to be treated individually. There's too many silos out there, and it's important that people recognize their own plan. Medication is one option. There's peer support, there's group work, there's self-help, self journeys that you do.
Yeah.
There's taking on our own wellness, there's case management, there's psychotherapy. There is a plethora of options to help. And yet our system really says, go to the psychiatrist, get medication. And it just boggles me. So I started looking deeply into that, and I found this is a stat that I was like, whoa, 19% of adults over the age of 60 have taken antidepressants in the last month. Just 20% of our seniors
Wow.
are on.
Wow.
I was like, what? So, and there's massive side effects to medication, and they're not talked about enough. We don't hear about the risks of, addiction. They're addictive. So look up like what happens to people when they withdraw all some of these medications. There's incredible stories, and really incredible. So physical and psychological impairment is on the label. Usually impairment means under the influence. So that means 20% of our seniors are under the influence. That explains a lot of fun
I think
stuff.
it's because I don't think people know what to do, so they go to the doctor, and the doctor is trained with
Yeah.
medications, and they give the medication. But there needs to be like, that's where your mobilizing mental health comes in, right? Of
Well, that's it.
helping people live and move forward.
And the
Help them.
medication is there to be prescribed in combination with therapy. So if you're on medication and you're not in therapy, essentially you're using it wrong.
Yeah,
That's the way I see it. And it's we got to be really careful that for some reason out there, and I might even challenge, pharmaceutical industry kind of thing here, Jane, risk of putting that out there. But this needs to be a bigger conversation for sure. That
yeah,
we are over medicating, and it's incredible to think the damage on kidneys and liver. So I was
yeah,
discussing that with Dr. Sampaio from Peace 360, who talked about like we don't have enough solid research that talks about how these mental health medications are affecting the liver. and really looking at, we know, because he does research on stem cell therapy and looking at how different medication affects the organs of the liver. And, wow.
So we need to have him on
just
for sure.
The seniors, like our seniors. So if we look at that, addiction, withdrawal, all of those things. So I think medication is a big conversation to have, and it does help people when they need it.
Right.
It's helping people when they use it properly. And we need to be more responsible about prescribing it. And also, we also need to be more responsible about our own mental health.
Yeah.
The journeys that we can take on our own are often the ones that help us the most.
It's true. And we are going to, this is why we're doing Friday Focus, because we're going to talk about a lot of subjects. And so we will sign off. But I'm going to say for next Friday, we're excited. We're going to have our first guest on. And so we're going to have Cindy Shaw on. She's someone local here where I live in Kelowna. She's incredible. She is a certified Amen brain health coach. She's a neuro-linguistic practitioner and a hypnotherapist, and she is brilliant on healing the brain so that you can have a healthy mind. And we're going to bring her on, and so you can meet her and have a really interesting discussion on brain health and how important that is.
So interested to ask her about the gut and the brain.
Yeah, she's interesting. Yeah, she's amazing. So that's what we're doing next Friday. So thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate you if you watch right to the end, and this is important information to get out there. So
I encourage everybody to go on their own internet rabbit holes and look at some stats and facts and share them in the comments with us.
Yeah,
that's really what we want to continue all these conversations with everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.